Right. So what we learned is that this deputy was in his apartment, was in Duncan's apartment. It would have been about 4 days after Duncan was put in the hospital. It's not known how much he touched things that were around him, if he had touched any of his bodily fluids that were still left in the apartment. It's not known. But I can tell you a couple of things that we do know, Wolf. Wolf, Ebola doesn't live on surfaces for more than a few hours. And you need direct contact with a person or with their bodily fluids in order to get sick. The state of Texas says that there is no indication that this patient had any direct contact with Duncan. So this is a real wait and see kind of thing here. And another thing I want to be very clear about, the early signs and symptoms of Ebola, Wolf, you've had them, I've had them. Pretty much everyone has had them. It's a low-grade fever, you feel achy, your stomach might hurt, you might be vomiting. It can look like so many other diseases.
So Elizabeth, are they going to give him an Ebola test now at the hospital in Frisco to just make sure he doesn't have Ebola?
You know, Wolf, I doubt that, and here's why. The test is not the greatest test in the world. So if you have Ebola inside you, if you're infected with Ebola, but you're not sort of actively ill for quite a while, it's going to be negative. So, you know, they might give him a test because he is feeling some symptoms, but that won't be the last test that they give him, because early on in the illness, it can be a negative test even if you really do have Ebola. So they might test him today, but then they would certainly want to test him tomorrow or in subsequent days if they're still concerned.
This patient, what was he doing at that apartment where Thomas Eric Duncan had been staying after he arrived from in the United States from Liberia?
Well, Wolf, there's still a lot of question marks. What we do know is that 3 sheriff's deputies on Wednesday of last week, so a week ago today, escorted a county health official who was giving orders to this family to stay inside their apartment. So the deputies didn't hand the orders to the family. They escorted the official who was giving the orders to the family. We don't know if those orders were given outside their door, if they were given in their living room. We don't know precisely where that happened. And we still don't know how this deputy would have had contact with Duncan, because Duncan at that point had been in the hospital for several days.
Several days indeed. And I want to be precise on this matter, Elizabeth. There have been many false alarms in hospital emergency rooms around the United States over the past several weeks, right?
That is true. Many of them have been people who flew in from West Africa and then became ill. And because they had just flown in from West Africa, they were put in the hospital, and out of an abundance of caution, they watched these people. But so far, all of them, except for Duncan, turned out to have something else. There's so many other diseases that look like Ebola that it's very easy to not be sure in the beginning.